On December 5th, 1978, winter settled over Mississippi's Gulf Coast. The day had peaked at 59 degrees, but by nightfall, the air had dropped to a sharp 36. The roads lay still and silent. And along Ladnier Road, one of the few lights breaking the darkness came from a small brick convenience store, its wide glass windows glowing like a beacon in the night. Inside, 20-year-old Debra Gunter worked the graveyard shift at the little general store. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The cooler droned in the back. It was the lonely soundtrack of another midnight shift. Debra believed it was her chance to build something better for herself and for her husband. But Debra was young, determined, still searching for her own peace and happiness. And then, sometime in the dark hours before dawn, she was gone. The little general store once promised shoppers that it only takes a minute. For Debra, those words became something else entirely, because a minute was all it took for everything to change. 4 days later, her body was discovered in the woods of McIntosh, Alabama, 85 miles from the store. It was a brutal murder that has haunted 2 states for more than 4 decades. The truth has never come out of the shadows. This is the story of Debra Gunter and the search for answers that has never stopped. Hey guys, and welcome back.
Yeah. Hey, welcome back, everyone. As you can tell, not only from our teaser trailer, but now from our new episode introduction, we are doing something a little different from our normal format. We've hinted at it on social media, but we have been doing extensive research and collaborating with a wonderful investigator. And additionally, for some time now, we have been discussing the idea of a long-form season. And we've been sort of testing the waters a bit with our multi-part episodes.
And in case anybody missed it, those get kind of confusing even for us, because I'm almost positive that when I had Sweet Lauren do the teaser, I had her completely label the next episode wrong.
Yeah.
Because I was
that too, but I don't think anybody else really paid attention because nobody said anything.
After I listened to it, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even give her the right episode number because I looked at the wrong thing. Yeah. So when you start getting into season 2, episode 3, part 5, all of those numbers start to run together. So we've had a great response to the miniseries that we've been doing.
We have.
It helps us out because we are able to research one case more thoroughly, as opposed to having to research a case and then immediately jump into researching another case. And sometimes that ends up leaving a case with unanswered questions for us that we would really like to know. Mm-hmm. But when you're trying to get out cases for everybody or every case on the list, there's just not enough time.
There isn't, yeah. We try so hard to do the best we can, but as many of you probably already know, we just can't keep up.
So, with the beginning of fall, we are starting our first season dedicated to one case, the very special case of Debra Gunter.
Right. And we already kind of discussed this a little bit, but before we get into our episode, Carrie, can you give us a little introduction on how we came to learn of Debra's case and maybe a little bit about the very knowledgeable and amazing investigator we've been so fortunate to work with?
After looking at so many cases, I've kind of just stopped believing in coincidences. And you hear it all the time. Actually, there's an investigator that I talk to regularly, and he will tell me in almost every conversation, there is no such thing as coincidences. And I'm starting to believe that, really.
I 100% agree.
Time and time again, I've gone into something thinking I was there for one reason, only to realize later that it was actually leading me somewhere else. Sometimes it was to a clue. Sometimes it was to a bit of peace during a rough patch. For example, I called an agency one time about a case that we planned to cover. And I asked, like we always do, if they would meet me if I came up there. And I am honest to God, still not sure what made them say yes to a mom working from home, just getting ACCA started, and really not a lot of people knowing about it. But that yes turned into the start of an amazing partnership and a friendship that I didn't even know I needed.
Yeah.
Now, there is not a day that goes by without some random text between us about what is going on in our life. Also, she's getting married, and I'm getting to be the wedding planner / I guess organizer. I'm not really sure. I get to boss people around the day of. I'm so excited.
It's going to be just perfect for you. Like, you have all this extra time, though.
She said, wedding director. Yeah. She said they went to the venue, and the lady was like, they go check out the wedding venue, and the lady tells her, I don't care what anybody tells you. You need a wedding director.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be a friend. It doesn't need to be somebody in the wedding party. It doesn't need to be a family member. You need somebody who is not going to care what other people think. The only concern for them is making sure that your day is exactly what you want it to be.
And guess who's perfect for that?
And she said, I know a lady, and immediately calls and said, so how would you feel about being a wedding director? And I was like, well, I did it for one of my friends one time. So does it mean I get to boss people around? And she said, absolutely. And I was like, sold. And she said, I just need you to know that it pays in my love and friendship and appreciation. And I was like, all you had to do is tell me that I could boss people around. And I was sold. Like, I'm good. What do you need me to do? And so every day we're going back and forth about stuff like that. And it has been so much fun. But it just goes to show you that sometimes a conversation that you think is about one thing ends up opening the door to something much bigger. And that is exactly how I learned about Debra Gunter. Lieutenant Darren Versiga with the Pascagoula Police Department also runs a private investigations firm. A few months ago, he posted about a case that I knew very well, the disappearance of April Johnson from Choctaw County. I had never met Lieutenant Versiga, but he had mentioned in his write-up Alabama cold case advocacy.
Which I thought was amazing.
I did too. And it was something where he had talked about the fact that there had not been a whole lot of media coverage on it. And he was referencing the people that had covered it. And there we were. Mm-hmm. So I commented and thanked him for sharing April's case and talking about it, because I thought that the more eyes that were on it, the more help they could get. You know, we talk about that all the time, how important it is to share these cases. And I even offered to help because I thought, okay, here's somebody that is in the law enforcement field. You know, they're obviously going to have access to resources, and he's a private investigator. You know, he's going to know things that we don't know. And I offered any kind of assistance that we could possibly have. Mm-hmm. And so we ended up talking, and I shared some information that we had gotten because Michael Fleming of Criminally Curious and I had went to Silas, one of the areas where April was last seen, and kind of canvassed the area, passed out flyers and things like that. I talked to the investigator and butler, and, I kind of just shared some information with him, passed along the investigator's contact information in case he came across anything. And so we end up talking for quite a while and end up, like we normally do, on other subjects and topics, and pretty quickly realized that we shared the same goal: creating a better database for missing persons and unidentified.
Right.
He was working on the very same things for Mississippi that we are working on here in Alabama.
Which is just nuts. Again, I don't believe in coincidences either.
No. And it was like, oh my gosh, I think the whole reason that we crossed paths on this April Johnson case, because he's not exactly close to Choctaw County, is because we needed this connection for these other things that we are working on. And then he mentioned that he has a case from 1978, and it's the murder of Debra Gunter, who was found in McIntosh. And that immediately caught my attention because I knew that in that same year, just a few months earlier, Kathy Sue Carpenter had vanished from Washington County.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, that conversation turned into ways that we could possibly collaborate. And I probably drive him insane with my questions. But I think we both know that we're starting to connect dots that might actually finally lead somewhere.
Exactly.
And we also would like to mention that Darren will be a key speaker at the True Crime Chronicles Q&A presentation on the serial killer Sam Little, because Lieutenant Versiga is just a fountain of knowledge when it comes to Samuel Little.
Yeah.
And that is going to be held on November 1st in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. We will link the details in our episode description, but we also have shared a post on our social media pages so that you can go buy tickets. Be sure to go check that out. He is wonderful to listen to in general. But that is a very interesting story because, believe it or not, there have been serial killers that have traveled across the South for years, and Sam Little is one of those.
Right. And, well, as many of you may know from our last Unforgotten talk, Dana did a case that they are pretty sure is related to that as well. So anyway, so Dana is just anxious to talk more with him as well. So yeah, this is going to be a very interesting, and I just think it's going to be a really good season. And, we hope, as always, that we're contributing to the case and maybe a few things come to light.
Agreed. Before we get into the case, so back in December of 2023, a grand jury had indicted Billy Joe Turner in connection with the death of Charles Jackson Jr., who was also known as Bubba Jackson. So Bubba Jackson was actually last seen in Mobile County in 2014. And my understanding is that he was last seen walking. I'm not exactly sure where he was walking from or where he was walking to, but my understanding is he was walking from somewhere in Sims with a destination of possibly Citronelle, which is a very long ways to walk.
Oh yeah, that is a ways.
And he never made it there. His body has never been found. And then back in 2023, the grand jury indicted Billy Joe Turner, and there was a co-defendant, or is a co-defendant, Bridget Matthews. Bridget Matthews' trial is set for October, but they just had the trial of Billy Joe. And the allegations were that Billy Joe had ran Bubba Jackson over with a vehicle, beat him, and then left him for dead. Where they left him, I'm not entirely sure. But apparently, they didn't have enough evidence to actually convince a jury that this is what had happened. because the jury came back and found Billy Joe not guilty. Billy Joe's attorney, Tom Walsh, told media outlets he didn't think the prosecutors should have even brought the case. He said there was no physical evidence and the state's star witness was a disaster. So I hate that.
Yeah.
And I think what makes it even harder to swallow kind of is that fact that we just had the trial.
I was just going to
Brittany Robinson's dad.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also unsuccessful.
Right. And, you know, we hate it when trials have to be drawn out and they, you know, we keep waiting and waiting and waiting for the trial to happen. But in every circumstance, I'd much rather wait 10 years for a trial than wait 2 or 3 years for a trial and have this happen.
Yeah. And according to Fox 10, there was testimony elicited that Matthews, Turner, and Jackson knew each other. But Billy Joe's attorney argued there was no evidence that his client was the one who committed murder. They said he attacked the credibility of the witness, who faces a probation revocation proceeding in a drug case, and that the witness had told multiple versions of the same story, and that the whole case was based on rumor, conjecture, guesswork, and speculation. Now, Keith Blackwood, the Mobile County District Attorney, you know, he said he respected the jury's decision and vowed to pursue justice in every case. But he also said, cold cases like this one are always an uphill battle, but this family deserved their day in court, and we were willing to fight alongside them for justice. And I guess the
sentiment's good.
As disappointing as the sentiment is good. And I guess as disappointing as the outcome is, maybe that does give them an idea of where they need to strengthen that case before they proceed to Bridget Matthews' trial. And so maybe there can be a different outcome there.
Yeah, those kind of cases are very difficult to swallow. You almost wish that if they knew going in they didn't have a lot, but they thought maybe they could convict, you know, that kind of maybe, that they would bring different kinds of charges against them, you know, rather than risk not getting a guilty charge for murder.
And I think that's one of those, I think that's why we hear a lot of times, you know, you only get one shot.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times whenever they get ready to take these cases to trial, they want to have the most solid case that they can have. And so I would be curious, or I am curious, not would be because I am, as to how they analyze these cases and determine which ones have the most solid chance of going to trial.
Yeah.
And how do they determine that the case that they are taking is the absolute best case scenario?
Mm-hmm.
I know how we do that, but
it kind of makes me wonder. Yeah, it kind of makes me wonder if her trial, if they have better evidence for her or not. I mean, who, you know, there is the chance that there's different evidence in each case. And if there's different evidence in each case, which one was the strongest? And should they have done hers first?
And I would have to go look at the interviews that Walsh gave to gave in general to actually listen to what he said. But what was interesting about the quote that Fox Stanton pulled out was he said there was no evidence that his client had committed murder. He didn't say there was no evidence that Bubba Jackson had been murdered. He just said there was no evidence his client had done it. So maybe there is evidence there that somebody did it. He's just saying it wasn't his client. It'll be interesting to see. I guess we need to look to see when that trial's coming up to kind of follow along with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Also, another bit of recent news for those who haven't heard yet. We posted on social media, but not all of you are watching social media. As our longtime listeners and ACCA followers know, the very first season of Unforgotten, we covered, it was a case that we still work on behind the scenes, and it stays very close to our hearts. And it's pretty well known down in the South, especially in Alabama, since it's an Alabama case. And that's the case of Brittany Wood. We have worked with her stepmom, Stephanie, closely through the years to, continue the efforts to bring out the truth of her disappearance.
And it is no secret, we have had no love lost with several members of Brittany's family. But we have always maintained that we only wish for the truth to be told, and that the innocent victims involved directly or indirectly in this very twisted case could one day be at peace. For Brittany to have some semblance of justice. Unfortunately, there has been a loss to add to the casualties in this case for some of Brittany's innocent family members.
A few days ago, as we're recording this, on October 8th, Brittany's mother, Chessie Wood, lost a several-month health battle and passed away at home with her family close by her side. At this time, we will not discuss the part she or anyone else may or may not have played in Brittany's case. Rather, for now, we are only providing our condolences to her family and friends, especially her young children and granddaughter, recognizing that every life is precious and hers was a life claimed by cancer and illness far too soon.
It was December 1978, just south of McIntosh, Alabama. Near an old abandoned drive-in theater, a man walked through the woods expecting to find scraps of lumber or aluminum. Instead, he stumbled onto something that would haunt 2 states for decades. A young woman missing from her job at a convenience store in Mississippi had been found. Her name was Debra Gunter. She was just 20 years old. To understand how Debra ended up there, how an ordinary shift at a little general store turned into a mystery that's still unsolved more than 40 years later, we have to go back. Back to her beginnings, back to her family, back to that night.
Horace and Ruth Mullis built a modest life in Warner Robins, Georgia. Horace worked as a house parent at River Edge Behavioral Center, while Ruth spent long hours as a machine operator at Boeing Aircraft. Together, they raised 2 daughters, Debra and Sarah. Debra Lynn Mullis was born on May 20th, 1958. In a 2022 interview with WLOX, her sister Sarah described her as a caring sister. Her cousin Susan remembered her as fun-loving and outgoing, recalling the Friday and Saturday nights they spent at the skating rink, laughing and enjoying life. Susan also described Debra's life as hard, a simple phrase that leaves much unsaid. What is clear is that Debra was always searching for joy wherever she could find it.
Debra was just 16 when she met the love of her life, 20-year-old Donald Lee Gunter. Swept up in the hope of starting a future together, she left high school behind. On December 9th, 1974, Debra and Donald were married in Houston County, Georgia. Soon after, the couple moved to Gautier, Mississippi to be closer to Donald's family. Both Debra and Donald struggled to find steady work. Eventually, Debra found a job at the little general store on Ladner Road in Pascagoula. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a paycheck, and it gave her some independence.
The hours, though, were tough. Debra worked the overnight shift, 11 p.m. to 11 a.m., and in a store that sat quiet once the sun went down. Her family worried about her being there alone. Over Thanksgiving holiday in 1978, and the last time the Mullis family would ever see Debra, Ruth pleaded with Debra to quit. She felt the store was too isolated, too empty, and she worried that something bad could happen. The little general store wasn't a supermarket. It was a kind of small fluorescent-lit convenience store you'd pass on almost every corner in the late 1970s. On Ladner Road, it served the neighborhood as a quick stop for milk, bread, or a late-night pack of cigarettes. The store itself was modest, a simple brick building with ads plastered on the walls and wide glass windows glowing like a beacon in the dark.
When I watched old news footage of it, I couldn't help thinking it was the Dollar General of its day. And if you live in Alabama, you know. You can barely throw a rock without hitting one. And you'll understand why that matters later. The difference was Little General's were open late, often all night. Little General wasn't just a local shop either. By the mid-1980s, the chain was big enough that Circle K bought out more than 400 of its stores across the Southeast. The company's mascot was a cartoonish little soldier in a pint-sized cap, more like a cereal box cartoon than a military figure. I came across an old advertisement with a tagline that now feels chillingly ironic. It only takes a minute. Back then, it meant quick stops and easy smiles. But in the late night quiet of a store set off the beaten path, that line feels different. A minute for the wrong car to pull up, a minute for the wrong person to walk through the door, a minute and everything changes.
Around 3:49 a.m. on December 5th, 1978, a clerk at the Little General on Eden Street and Old Mobile Highway in Pascagoula flagged down an officer on patrol to report a robbery. She said a man walked into the store with one hand shoved in his pocket like he had a gun and demanded money, which honestly paints the kind of mental picture you'd expect to see on TV. Not exactly criminal genius, but effective enough. She gave him $40 and he left on foot.
Just 3 minutes later, around 3:52 a.m., another Little General was hit. This one on 14th Street and Highway 90. The clerk was counting packs of cigarettes when she looked up to find a man standing at the register. He told her this is a holdup and ordered her to give him the money. She handed over an unknown amount and he ran south on 14th. Robberies like these weren't rare. A quick dive into the archives turned up at least 25 Little General holdups between 1970 and 1977. And I stopped there, not because the robbery stopped, but because the patterns and overlaps were multiplying. At that point, it was clear the problem could take up an entire episode on its own. So I gave it one and turned back to Debra's case.
Around 4:05 a.m., Little General manager Pat Ellison tried calling the Little General store on Ladner where Debra was working her overnight shift. No one answered. A few minutes later, a local man named Mitchell Heel pulled into the store. Debra's car was parked out front, but the place was empty. Heel called out for the clerk. No response. After a few tries, he realized something was wrong and left to find help. Heel flagged down a Jackson County deputy, Mike Diamond, who was patrolling nearby, and the two returned to the store together. Inside, they found Debra's purse, her sweater, and her car still parked outside. But Debra, and about $50 from the register, were gone. Jackson County investigator Jack Walker was assigned as lead, and an all-points bulletin went out. Missing employee, Little General Food Store, 109 Ladner Road, Gautier, Mississippi. Debra Gunter, age 20, date of birth, May 20th, 1958, 5 feet tall, 110 pounds, green eyes, brown hair just below the ears. Last seen wearing blue jeans and a bright, multicolored flowered pullover blouse.
Authorities wouldn't confirm whether they suspected the same person involved in the robberies of the Little Generals that night were also responsible for Debra's disappearance. What they did say was that her abduction likely occurred sometime between 3:30 and 4 a.m. The next day, investigators released a suspect description, reported in the press as being for one of the suspects. He was described as a white male, 23 to 24 years old, about 5'8", 150 pounds, with shoulder-length blonde hair. He was wearing a green field jacket and blue jeans. A composite sketch followed, though in it the hair looked shorter, just below the ears, and more of a mop top than shoulder length. The phrasing, though, one of the suspects, suggests that from the very beginning, authorities may have believed that more than one person was involved. Whether they thought the same men committed all three crimes together or separately wasn't made clear.
When no ransom demand came, And when investigators found nothing in Debra's background that suggested a dangerous or precarious life, lead investigator Jack Walker told the press that authorities believed her disappearance was strictly a robbery kidnapping. But despite the theory, little progress was being made. On December 8, 1978, a $2,500 reward was offered in the case, $1,000 put up by Little General, and another $1,500 raised by Debra's family and friends. For her family, the silence was unbearable.
For investigators, the longer the hours stretched with no sign of Debra, the more their concern began to harden into fear. And within days, those fears would be confirmed. On what should have been her 4th wedding anniversary, the case of 20-year-old Debra Gunter shifted from a missing person to something far darker. What was found 85 miles away in rural Alabama would change everything and mark the beginning of a hunt that still hasn't ended.
Next time on Unforgotten.
On December 9th, 1978, a man walked into the woods outside McIntosh, Alabama. Some reports say he was looking for scrap lumber. Others say aluminum cans. Either way, what he found wasn't either of those things.
Brutality laid bare in a patch of woods off Highway 43. The case had shifted from disappearance to homicide, from uncertainty to horror.
In the 70s, newspapers pushed out morning and afternoon editions. Presses clattered, reporters raced, and headlines often mattered more than accuracy or compassion for families still reeling from trauma. And this case is no exception.
In less than 48 hours, not only had the local readers seen multiple versions of the story, but the most graphic details were now in print from Mississippi to Alabama to newspapers across the United States.
2 days after Debra was found, almost everything investigators knew was already in print.
On December 11th, the Macon County Telegraph in Georgia ran a short, restrained article. It's striking. In Mississippi and Alabama, Debra was a victim in a string of violent crimes. In Georgia, she was remembered as a daughter, a sister, and a wife.
By February 15, 1979, the case took a startling turn. The Alabama authorities had requested Debra's body be exhumed.
Each case has its own circumstances, its own unanswered questions. But the timing, the geography, and in some instances, the patterns make it impossible to ignore. If you have any information regarding the abduction and murder of Debra Gunter, please contact the Jackson County Sheriff's Office by phone at 228-769-3063 or through their mobile app. You may also submit an anonymous tip through Mississippi Coast Crime Stoppers via telephone at 877-787-5898 or through their website, which is linked in the episode description.
Since Alabama Cold Case Advocacy's creation, we have dedicated innumerable hours to researching and networking in an effort to provide the largest platform we can to the cases we share. We shoulder all associated expenses with Alabama Cold Case Advocacy out of our own pocket, including the subscription fees for researching and production of the Unforgotten podcast to provide a cost-free avenue for the victims' families of those cases.
We hope you will join in our efforts to raise awareness of Alabama's missing and murdered and support these families who have been forced to carry the immeasurable loss of their loved ones and the fight for answers. If you appreciate our mission and you are inspired to make a donation, your extra support will enable the ACCA to continue our research, share the cold cases, and help those families know that they are also unforgotten.
Unforgotten is an Alabama cold case advocacy podcast, recorded in conjunction with Riverside FM, hosted and distributed by Red Circle to your favorite podcast platforms. Content, research, artwork, and production are by Sellers and Stormy of Alabama Cold Case Advocacy. Credits for music, sound clips, special mentions, and research sources can be found in each episode's description. Your support helps us continue producing Unforgotten and further Alabama Cold Case's mission of advocacy and awareness. There are a few ways you can help us light the path. Make a one-time or monthly donation to Unforgotten through Red Circle, sign up for a one-time or recurring donation through the ACCA website, or subscribe to the Unforgotten Patreon channel for early access to ad-free episodes. You will find the links for all three in our episode descriptions. Another cost-free way to be of great help is to follow us on social media, but most importantly, whatever you do, tell everyone you know about these cases. Sharing their stories is one of the most effective ways to help find resolution for Alabama's cold cases. Be the spark. Thank you for listening, and until next time, remember, justice may be delayed, but the victims and their families remain unforgotten.
That was good. You did good on that one.
Thanks.